Assemble IGN readers and viewers because boy, do we have a ton of Marvel's Avengers impressions to go through today. Hello everyone, my name is Jonathon Dornbush from IGN and I'm joined by the wonderful Tom Marks.
Hello.
Hi, and we are going to be talking about Marvel's Avengers, which is currently in its rolling beta program. It's going to be available in beta for a few different weekends for various players on different platforms. Tom has published his initial review and progress impressions of Marvel's Avengers. He'll be handling the full review when we get closer to launch. I do want to preface before we go into this conversation, we know that this is not the full game that we're working with here, and Tom's impressions are not trying to give you necessarily his opinions on what the full game is or is going to be. We're looking more at the fact that we now finally have such an in-depth look at Marvel's Avengers, and there have been so many questions that this beta really gives us a better holistic look at what the game is and is going to be in its full release.
Yeah, we've got, there's a lot of things missing, right? There's not the full roster. There's only 4 of the 6 that'll be at launch. There's, only 1 skill page per hero instead of the 3 that'll be at launch. There's only a limited number of missions, only 3 from the story itself. There's a lot missing, and we know that. This is not trying to say the final word on this game, but we played enough. I played over a dozen hours to at least get a sense of, some of the core systems and how those feel.
Definitely, and be sure to check out Tom's full written impressions on IGN.com for a look at that. But of course, as we're even calling this a review in progress, he's not putting a score or a would-be score on that in-progress discussion because we do know sort of the early nature that we're looking at it. But there is so much to discuss, so let's jump right into it because there is a lot to look at. I think the first main topic I want to focus on, though, is the campaign. We see the A-Day demo, or the A-Day level, that we've seen in demo form since E3 last year, as well as a few other story missions from the campaign. Tom, how did you feel about this look at what the campaign may actually look like in full as we get toward the full game?
So this is the part that impressed me most about this beta, I think. A lot of the multiplayer stuff, which we'll talk about later, I was less thrilled on, but the campaign missions that were here, and especially the second mission, which is this one of Kamala and Bruce Banner going through the woods looking for Jarvis in an old facility. I think that was great, right? It had so much heart and character. It had such really nice conversations, really good character moments, even aside sort of the more bombastic cinematic moments that we saw in that first Golden Gate Bridge level. It proved that it could still take time. This game can still take time to calm down, slow down, get into some really nice moments with really good acting, really good writing. And it made me very excited to play the single player of this game. It really, really did.
Yeah, it definitely feels a lot more in line with what we know recent Crystal Dynamics to be, which is the Tomb Raider reboot and Rise of the Tomb Raider. They did such a phenomenal job of making those really cinematic, story-driven stories, and that seems to be what we're getting out of this campaign. There's a lot, as you've said, especially in your written review in progress, a lot of really great small character moments that it's nice that they make that room for, alongside all of the action you would expect from a superhero Marvel game.
Yeah, and you still get, Hulk fighting Abomination and stuff like that. You still get those moments, but they feel really crafted and cool.
Exactly, yeah. And that is, I think, a thing that a lot of Marvel fans want, and we've only really gotten for a few select heroes over the years. Mm-hmm. But I do want to move into, because it is such a big facet of what this game is, and at the end of the day, the Avengers is a team of heroes. This is not a game about any one specific hero, even if Kamala is essentially sort of the protagonist of the story. But this is an Avengers game, and as part of that, you're going to be able to play in a number of different missions, either on your own, with AI companions, with random players, or with friends online through a whole host of different missions via the war table. In the downed helicarrier that is your superhero home for this game. So we got to see, a decent chunk of missions. There's a little over a dozen missions available for different Warzone, Drop Zone, and other mission types. What did you think of what we're seeing of what multiplayer is going to look like in the full game?
So this is the part that had me more worried. While the single player campaign I think is really enticing to me, I really am excited to dive back into that. I have a lot less excitement to dive back into the sort of these Drop Zone, Warzone things, which all to me felt very samey. They felt very sort of uninteresting, not as sort of nicely crafted as the campaign level, that second campaign level, not as many cute little character moments, right? Because there's just sort of generic multiplayer banter happening instead of these specific dialogue moments. And
all
it just
I do is win.
Yeah, there's a lot of annoying Tony Stark dialogue.
Yeah.
It slowed down a lot for me, and I think part of that is, well, the combat is really fun. It's really enjoyable to just like be one of these superheroes and smash stuff as the Hulk or fly around as Iron Man. I think they did a good job of making it feel relatively distinct in sort of flavor and flair. The one thing that they didn't do that for, I think, is the actual like functional combat. Everyone sort of has just that light attack on square and heavy attack on triangle, ranged attack on R2, and that or defensive attack on R2 and ranged L2 R2, and that makes them all really easy to pick up. But it also means that it felt like basically every fight I was in, no matter who I was using, just sort of devolved into like smashing square and triangle a bunch and just sort of mashing the button. And the frame rate would slow down in big fights on my PS4 Pro, which was a bummer, and everything would just sort of get blurred together and you'd just be hitting buttons. And I don't really know, like there wasn't enough mission variety for me to make that stay interesting long. I don't think. And like every time we did a new mission, like it was cool the first time, and then I sort of just like didn't really ever want to go back to it. So I think part of that is definitely the problem with the beta itself, because this is a limited amount of content. Obviously I can't be complaining about longevity or repetitiveness if I've only got a handful of missions to play, but those missions even within themselves were not diverse enough to like give me confidence that the full game and the full selection would be either. But we'll have to see. That one I have to give the benefit of the doubt on.
For sure, yeah. That's something we'll definitely see when we have that full suite of missions available, and also the full suite of character customization when it comes to skills, because as you had mentioned, we're only looking at one skill tree page right now. There are meant to be 3 in total, and that's where we're supposed to see a lot of the character customization on the attack level come. So we'll have to see what happens there.
That could all get deeper. It could
Exactly.
totally get deeper. It's just it wasn't deep, and it didn't give me a sense that it I don't know. It just gave me a nervous feeling basically while I was playing it.
And it's something we'll definitely see in the full game. I will say there was one mission type that I loved, and I hope that we see more variety like this. Where when we were playing together, there was one where essentially you have to unlock a vault door, and you have to have someone staying in the main area while other heroes go off to the sides to find the correct terminals and the correct number order, and those number orders would change if you died or if you were starting the mission anew. And it felt like, oh, here's the teamwork, here's the, oh, I'm over here, oh, I think 5's over there, go check there, oh, there are enemies right now in the middle, can you come help? That felt like, oh, this is the type of mission I want to play as a Team Avengers game.
Yeah, there were flashes of that for sure, but the flashes of that were then between these, 2-3 minute drop zone missions where you'd run in, have to destroy some object in the room, and then as soon as you did, all the enemies would disappear, so you would ignore any of them anyway, right? Like it was a mixed bag.
Exactly, yeah, and we'll definitely see what that full variety looks like when we get closer to launch. But I do want to talk about something else that we get definitely a taste of, I think, within the beta itself, and that is something that further goes on to the customizing the heroes the way you want to, the loot system, the gear system. Each hero can have their own different type of gear that you put on them to increase your power level overall and individual stats. It's different to every hero, the loot that you collect, but it is also not cosmetic at all. It does not make a change to how they look. All the cosmetics are held to costumes you unlock either in the game or via the marketplace. What did you think of the loot system in particular? Because the cosmetics is a different conversation, but specifically when it comes to loot.
I thought that the gear system was the most worrying part of this entire beta. I thought that it was completely uninteresting. I thought it was extremely sort of like boring and invisible, right? Because nothing was cosmetic and everybody sort of had just like generic melee item, generic ranged item, generic defensive item, which even thematically their images didn't make sense. Like, why are you collecting rib cages for the Hulk? Like, just didn't make any sense to me, right? Thematically. And then the things you get like are completely just invisible, incremental. Oh, now you get 2% more melee damage, maybe. Like, it just felt very boring to me. It was this convoluted mess of like stat numbers that were very marginal and always quickly replaced and didn't really show up except for a few like elemental sort of effects like pin particles or cosmic energy. Beyond those, nothing you put on really was like super visible in the actual heat of a fight. So it just sort of was like really like didn't give me any reason to want to grind. And I think that's like a potentially deadly issue for an online looter game that they want you to be playing for a long time to come, replaying these multiplayer missions if that is the case. And obviously, again, just like the skill trees and that sort of thing, all this gear could get more interesting later. It could be more versatile, but like I was getting bored of the loot like a few hours into this beta, right? And I put over a dozen hours in, and like that's really worrisome to me if I'm getting bored of it that quickly that I don't feel like it's gonna really give me much reason to keep playing in a long-term capacity after I've beaten the campaign.
Yeah. And we're really going to have to see how that loot grind, for lack of a better term, does work in the full capacity of it. Whether the mission variety allows for it to be more interesting, whether those status effects and the, you know, percentage increases do feel like they make a difference in the long term, or if, as it feels in the beta, you're just kind of getting the increases to have the power level to play the next mission. It's not necessarily improving how you play. So it'll be very curious to see what that all means for the full game. But like you said, there is a lot to talk about with the beta. And in fact, you know, this only covers really a small portion of what there is to discuss. You have your full thoughts in written form on IGN.com that people can go check out. And of course, if you want more beta-specific coverage, we have a lot on IGN.com, jumping into the gameplay, the heroes, the missions, all of that stuff. So you can go check that out if you're waiting to jump in or have been jumping in and have some thoughts you want to share. But of course, we will have more full thoughts on Avengers as the beta continues on, and of course, as we get to the full game's launch in early September. But thank you, Tom, so much for joining me and for giving us a pretty lengthy conversation, but only, you know, like touching the surface of really what's here to discuss. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
There's a lot here. A lot has me excited. A lot has me concerned, and I'm just excited to see kind of how some of this stuff shakes out for the full game.
Definitely, and definitely let us know if you're playing the beta, what you've been thinking of Marvel's Avengers so far, and we'll be discussing this game in the weeks and months to come for sure. But otherwise, check out all of our Avengers coverage on IGN.com, and as always, keep all of your assembling right here on IGN.